I'd like to welcome everyone. This is Antonio Amorin from Data Clairvoyance Group, and today we're going to be reviewing the DQAM, or the Data Quality Assessment Manager from Analytics Data Services and Data Clairvoyance Group. The DQAM is a unique piece of technology and is different from other technologies, specifically in the fact that you can do comprehensive data quality assessments utilizing the software. From this perspective, what you're able to do is analyze all the values, all the patterns, and all the other frequencies that we generate from the data itself. And this again allows for a comprehensive assessment to be performed. Probably the biggest differentiator between the DQAM and, say, data profiling technology is the fact that you're doing your analysis at the value level. Versus in a profiling tool, you typically are doing your analysis at the column level or at the table level. So again, this is a pretty big differentiator because you're going to be analyzing the values themselves and determining if they're valid or invalid, adding metadata to indicate whether it's valid or invalid, along with a note that identifies why a specific category was assigned to a value. In addition, the DQAM has a clearly defined workflow that guides the analyst through the assessment process all the way through completion. And again, this is something that is missing from, say, profiling technology, where the tool is a lot more open or allows for various implementations and approaches to be utilized. In addition, the DQAM has the ability to identify requirements for rules. There are 3 different types of rules that you're going to want to identify coming out of the DQAM. Those 3 rules would include your monitoring rules to ensure the data going forward, your remediation rules to clean up the data in the existing source system, and your transformation rules to, again, between your remediation runs, be able to leverage the data and source the data out and transform it into the correct state. So again, there are 3 different types of rules that are supported, and we'll cover those during the review of the software itself. In addition, the DQAM supports collaboration with the data community. The data community has the ability to review the assessment results as well as the rules that have been identified specific to a value and determine if they agree with them or not. In addition, there's a clearly defined data quality assessment scorecard and category score. From this perspective, you're able to, again, look at the data and determine, from the score itself, how much of it is valid or invalid. And in addition, the category score helps you to identify how many different types of categories or problems were found within the data. Without delaying any further, we'll go ahead and jump right into the product and get started today. So again, the DQAM is embedded in the Analytics Mapping Manager tool. And so what you're seeing in front of you right now is the login to that product. When I sign into it, we're able to go up to the left-hand corner and select the different tiles that activate the different modules within the Mapping Manager tool. Some of the reasons we work specifically with the Mapping Manager tool is to reuse some of its existing modules, such as the System Manager. This is going to be utilized to identify all the data to be analyzed. So whether it's relational or flat files, all the different forms of our DBMSs are going to be supported and be able to be connected to through the System Manager. We also leverage the Resource Manager, which allows us to identify specific people or resources to utilize during the assessment process. So again, these 2 existing modules are used heavily by the Data Quality Assessment Manager, or the DQAM, which is this tile right here. When I select this tile, it will immediately open up the product, and the first thing we need to do is create a work area. So we're going to add a project. In this project, we're just going to call this the DQAM demonstration. And we have the ability to give it a cost center. So a lot of our clients want a cost center associated to the data quality projects, so you can enter that. And a brief description. So here we'll say something along the lines of, this project is intended to demonstrate, if I can spell, demonstrate the functionality and capabilities within the DQAM software. So again, this is just a brief description. We also want to put in a project manager name. That I usually play that role, so I'll put my name in there. Mike Boggs will be our IT sponsor, and my business partner Ruben, who's not an IT guy, he can be our business owner or business sponsor. So once we have that entered, we'll go ahead and save that, and that creates our work area. There are 2 things that we can do within the project itself from right here, which is add and associate both project resources as well as project documents to this project. So we'll start with the resources. These, again, are going to be the folks that are going to be working on the assessment itself. So we'll select all of these people, and we'll go ahead and move them into it and save it. So now they're part of our project. And as you can see, we can see the resource ID or their login, if you will, into the Mapping Manager tool, and then also their actual names and the roles that have been assigned to them. So again, the roles that we're looking for here would be our data quality analyst, which in this case is Dave Emrim, the lead data quality analyst, which is me and Antonio Amorin, and typically this is the role I play, is the lead role. Then from our data community, we have Becky Brown, who represents the business owner. The governance representative is Bob Garner. We also have a custodian, Joanne Jacone, and a steward, Lydia Fox, as well as a subject matter expert, which is Mike Remington in this example. In addition to being able to add resources or people to the project, we can also add project documents. So if you had a program charter or a data dictionary that was specific or associated to the data we're going to be analyzing, you can add this at the project level, and everybody who works on the project will have the ability to come in and view that. So again, the next step in our process is we'll go to the Assessment tab, and from here we'll actually start the data quality assessment process. When we select our project, across the top you're going to see the chevrons that identify our clearly defined workflow. The first step in our process is to create a project, and once that's done, which is where we are right now, we're going to come in and add data to that project. So the identified data chevron is next. Once we've identified the data, we'll execute our engines to help us determine what data we're going to do the assessments against, and then we'll actually perform the assessments. Once the assessment is complete, the lead or role will then review the assessment results and validate them. And then the lead gets to create rule requirements, And then once those rule requirements have been identified for every single value, the next step is for the team to review the assessment and rule results. And so that's our collaboration component. And then once that's done, the assessment is complete. And then finally, we come in behind after the assessment is complete and identify our transformation and remediation rules. So again, that is our clearly defined workflow. Below that, we have tiles that represent a dashboard. And so as we add tables and columns and rows of data, we'll actually see these numbers change and increase as we add different objects and we perform the assessments. So the next step in our process is we're going to go ahead and select the tables. And within the table assessment screen, we click on the Edit button. And this opens up our metadata repository, which allows us to add a data source specifically to this project. So here I'm going to grab this contact table, which is part of our training data. And I can drag and drop it, and then once I've done that, I can say save and continue, and it now belongs as part of our project. Again, to do this in a profiling tool is like 4 screens, so I really like this functionality where it's just a drag and drop, and we're off to the races. If we come back up to the project level, you'll see that we've added one table, and that table has 17 columns. You'll also see that we've identified the data, so that chevron is now colored blue to indicate we've started that process. Within the contact table itself, we're ready to go ahead and start doing more detailed work, so we're going to click on the Edit button, which allows us to then come in and run our different assessment engines against this particular table. The first engine we're going to run is going to be at the attribute level. So again, the idea here is that we're going to run this, and it's going to gather some basic metadata that we're going to utilize to determine which columns we want to analyze deeper or perform assessment against. So here, the metadata that was gathered includes the row count, the number of distinct values, our null rule, and then also the most frequent and least frequent value. So what's really important here, though, is actually the unique value count. For instance, if we were to come in and try to analyze in this particular demonstration the last name, we'll see that there are 38,361 distinct values. That would take quite a while to analyze. Although we do this work, it won't make sense to do it right now for this demo. Instead, we're probably going to select this gender, which has 36 distinct values, and we're also going to bring in the first name just because there's a few functionalities or capabilities where I need a little bit more data in order to demonstrate the value of it. So again, once we've decided on the columns that we're going to perform assessments against, we'll select those 2 columns. And we run our second engine, which is the value analysis engine, and we click on the value analysis button to execute that engine. While it's running, I'll tell you that this is going to now create metadata at the value level, and it does it directly from the data itself. So the new metadata we're going to see has come right from the value itself. If I select this row and slide to the right, you will see that we've added some additional metadata, which includes our number of distinct patterns, also our most frequent and least frequent patterns. And again, this would be information that you can only gather at the value level, not at the column level. So again, that's the idea there. We're also going to go ahead and add the resources that we've brought into the project and assign them specifically to the gender column. When we do this now, you'll see this a little later in the demonstration where those are the folks that get associated directly to the roles that are utilized within the assessment process. So the next step is we're going to go ahead and drill into the gender. And once we do this, again, this is our attribute overview screen for gender. Across the top, what you're seeing are our chevrons, and as you can see, the execute engines is now colored because we did execute our engines, identify the data we wanted to perform our assessments against, and actually now we're in doing the assessment. So the perform assessment is the chevron that will next change as we come in and we actually start performing the assessment. This will change colors to indicate that it's active, and then it'll change colors again when we complete. Beneath that, we have some context information that came right from the previous screen, such as our project and database name, the project manager, the table, and the attribute. In addition, we have the metadata that was inferred at the attribute level, so the number of rows, the number of unique values, our null rule, and then our value level, which is our number of unique patterns, the maximum minimum value, so our range is new, and then also the most frequent and least frequent value and patterns. So again, this is going to start giving us the ability to get kind of an understanding of the data specific to gender. For instance, in our range alone, I can see both the maximum value, which is test, and our minimum value, which appears to be spaces, that neither one of these are valid. Really for the gender in our example today, the correct values are uppercase male and female. So our most frequent value is uppercase female, which is correct, but our least frequent value appears to be a single quote, which of course is not a valid gender. In addition, we can see our most frequent and least frequent patterns both have mixed case, which again is not appropriate for today's example. So again, that gives us some little insight into the data. We can start performing some of the assessment or knowing what we're going to be assessing based on that information. Beneath that are our 4 different types of frequencies represented by each box here. The first one on the left-hand side is our pattern frequencies. So again, what's different between the DQAM and other profiling tools, for instance, is that we have comprehensive patterns here. You're going to see every single pattern, no matter whether it's a million values represented by a pattern or 1 value. So again, this is different from profiling tools, which limit it oftentimes to the top 9 patterns. Unfortunately, that doesn't help us from a data quality perspective because typically most data quality problems have a low number of occurrences, and therefore the patterns aren't going to have a high number of occurrences or a number of unique values, so they'll be actually not showing up in the top 9 most of the time. That's not always true, but a rule of thumb is that it is a low number of occurrences, data quality problems. Within our patterns themselves, a capital A represents a capital alpha, a small a represents a small alpha. We also have S, which represents a sign, for instance, an equal sign, a plus sign, a minus sign. If it's got the word sign behind it, it's definitely going to be represented by an S. We also have a capital N, which represents our numeric values, and then capital P for our punctuation. So again, that's how our patterns are made up, and we can drill into those and see different details by drilling into them. The middle set of frequencies are our length frequencies, and again, here our valid values are uppercase male and female, which have length of 4 and 6. So any other lengths such as 1 or 20 or 3, 0, 9, 12, and 2, all of those would be invalid just based on the length itself. So we know that's true. In addition, we have our form frequencies. The idea behind the form frequencies is going to tell me what makes up a specific value. So here we say alpha only, we have numeric only, we also have special character. You can have combinations such as alphanumeric plus special character, numeric plus special character, alpha plus special character. There's also not applicable, which would be our spaces and low values. Those will be represented by not applicable. So those are the different types of form. And again, considering that our data should only be uppercase male and female, we know that our numeric values are incorrect, and also anything with a special character would be invalid. So again, this is going to help speed up the assessment process and help to isolate specific types of problems. And I'll demonstrate that a little bit more with the first name a little later. In addition, we have case frequencies. So when we're integrating data from various sources, a lot of times different systems store data in different cases. And even within a single system, I've seen data stored as both uppercase, mixed case, or lowercase. And again, when you could be replicating data or duplicating data based on the case alone. So we like to consolidate and make sure all the case is consistent across all the data. So again, that's where our case frequencies become powerful. In addition to not only showing whether it's mixed case, uppercase, lowercase, if it has numeric values, it'll also tell you if it's an uppercase numeric or lowercase mixed case numeric, or if it has a special character. So it'll show the variations and the combinations as well. So with that said, we can also view all of the values directly by clicking on our value analysis button here at the top of the screen. When I do this, it's going to open up our value analysis window. And again, very similar. Across the top, we have our chevrons. And again, this perform assessment is the one that's going to change colors as we go through and we do our assessment. Beneath that is again, our context information. And then we have a filtering capability as well as a sorting capability. I'll demonstrate those with the first name because it's going to make a lot more sense than doing it here with the gender. Beneath that, we have our actual values in a table. So here, in addition to the values, we also have the count, or how many occurrences or rows represent a specific value. We also have the pattern, the length, the form, and the case, which I've already explained. In addition, we have the content and spacing categories as well. The content really tells you, is there a single value there or multiple values within a single value? So if you have a piece of data that's separated by a space, it's going to figure that it's a multiple or two or more values within a specific value. So that's what we're seeing with content. Spacing is really because when you're analyzing data on a screen, it's hard to see when you have leading spaces, trailing spaces, or consecutive spaces. And again, the idea is that you can use the spacing to help shortcut that identification. It's not going to make a lot of sense for gender, but I'll show you that specifically when we look at the first name. So the big differentiator between this software and other software is the ability to come in and select a specific value and assign additional metadata to it. The metadata that we add to each of our values are actually categories and notes about the categories. So at the bottom of the screen here, we have a drop-down that identifies all our different categories. Now understand the categories themselves are customizable. So you can add new categories, edit the existing ones, remove existing ones, change the descriptions or the notes that associate directly to them, change the color of them. So you have complete control. You can configure the categories however you want them to be. But we ship with 9 types of categories for identifying anomalies in the data and 2 for identifying good data within the data. So The first category we have here is our invalid content. That's pretty obvious that the data is just wrong. Inconsistent content, this would be if the data it looks correct, but it's not consistent with the rest of the data. Say it's an abbreviation, we'll see that here in gender. We have an abbreviation versus the male-female. Let's say we have an M and F. That would be inconsistency. We can still figure out what the data should be, but it's not correct. So we would mark that as inconsistent. Questionable content, that's for items where we're asking a question to a subject matter expert or maybe the steward, where we're asking a question about the data saying, we're not sure about this, it doesn't look right. That would be our questionable content. Spelling, that's obvious, we have spelling mistakes. And we have this idea of mixed content. This is where we actually have too much data. So typically we'll see, like, let's say uppercase male, space, and Antonio. So obviously that is not just a gender, it's more than just the gender. We have the valid gender, and we have some additional information. We're not saying it's wrong. What we're saying is we have too much information, so we'll call that mixed content, saying that we have a valid gender, but we also have some additional data that should not be there. Next, we have duplicate content. What we mean by duplicate content is that we have two values that have the same business meaning. For instance, if this were, say, an account name, and we had Data Clairvoyance Group and Data Clairvoyance Group, Inc., they both have the same business meaning, so they're duplicates of one another. We also have the idea of case. So again, we like to have consistency in our case. So if the case is an issue, we'll mark that and flag it. Test data, so any data that contains the word test is most likely test data, so we have that as well. And then orphan value. This is if you have a set of valid values that you're validating against, and you have values that aren't in that valid list. So again, we mark those as orphan values. And then we have two categories for identifying good data, which is appears valid, which means we're 99% sure. We're not 100% because we think we might need to talk to somebody or we need a little bit more information in order to determine if something is valid. For instance, let's say a social security number. We might need to actually talk to the individual and validate a social security number, or we might be able to do it from, say, their first name, their last name, and a master list that we can go against. So again, the appears valid is just saying we think it's correct, but we're not 100%. Next, we have the valid value. This means we're 100% sure that this is a good value. And typically, you'll use that for any data where you have intimate knowledge about it, or any kind of code type, flag, or indicator. Those are typically going to be correct. So again, a valid value would be something that is valid, and we mark both good data and bad data. In this first example, we have spaces or nulls, and that's where I'm going to ask a question. So I'm going to mark this one as questionable. And rather than use the default, I'm going to come in and just replace it. I'm going to say, should nulls or spaces be allowed for gender? So again, I'm asking a question, and that's something that actually we always do with our assessment notes. We're always asking questions. We're not stating facts. Typically, we don't have intimate knowledge about the data, and that's not unusual. The product in this solution is intended to be, to identify rudimentary data quality problems, meaning that, things that are obviously wrong or just inconsistencies in the data itself. We can capture 70 to 80% of your data quality problems using the assessment process, and also, being able to not have any intimate knowledge about the data. The last 20 or 30% really require intimate knowledge about the data and business rules behind the data, and potentially might, also need to have a business person involved in order to identify and resolve them. Before we move forward, I would like to point out that since we did assign a category to our spaces or nulls here in the first one, that our perform assessment chevron at the top turned orange. And again, this is the color that it changes to when we're active. So next I'm going to go ahead and identify a few more issues in the data. These are invalid values, so I'll go ahead and flag those. We have a few more down here. I'm going to save that first though. And we have a few more that are invalid, such as this hybrid. That's not a valid one. Nor is the I love food, I love milk. We have some further down here, such as NA, O, and prefer not to answer. All those would be invalid. So we'll just go ahead and mark those as invalid content and save it. Next we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have some inconsistent content, which would be our abbreviations. So I'm going to grab those real quick and mark them as inconsistent content and save that. And then next I'm going to mark our case issues. So here, these are all ones that have case issues. They're not meeting our requirements for case. We'll go ahead and flag those and mark those as case issues. And then finally, we're going to mark the ones that are actually valid. So again, we identify both the valid and invalid data. So let's mark our valid values. So we'll do that as well. Now, before I go forward, I just want to kind of point out that the software itself enforces that you're doing a comprehensive assessment, that you're analyzing all the data. I'm going to mark these last two, which are spelling errors for male. I'm going to go ahead and mark those. But understand now, I'm going to save this. And when I do, I also could say assessment complete. Now, our assessment is actually not done. As you can see, I have tests down here at the bottom. And I like testing here. But I want to demonstrate the software is actually going to force that you analyze all the data and assign a category to everything. This way we can ensure that we've done a comprehensive assessment. We've analyzed everything. And we want to make sure that it does that in the software and forces it. So here it's also offering to put all the values that have not been analyzed or having a category assigned to them into a grid for us. We'll go ahead and say yes. And then it's going to recreate our table. It's only going to have the two values that we have not yet assigned a category to. Both of these, again, our test data, so we're going to go ahead and flag those as such and do a save. And now when I say assessment complete, it can finish, and we'll see our chevron perform assessment at the top. It's now turned green. So again, that is the first step in the actual assessment process. The next step would be for the lead, which is the role I typically play, to come in and validate the assessment itself. So in our example here, I actually did the assessment, so I know it's valid. So I'm just going to grab the first value and go all the way down and grab the last value. And I'm going to mark that I've reviewed it. And then I'm also the lead. Now you'll notice this review complete is grayed out right now. When I select this, it's going to automatically ungray it and make it available. So now I know when I click on this, it's going to finish the lead assessment review, and this is now going to turn green. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we can see the lead assessment review is now green, and we're ready to move forward. So the next step in our process, if I come out, is that we're going to actually look at the monitoring rules and create, suggest requirements for monitoring rules. So our new icon becomes available, which is the monitoring rule icon. When I click on this, it's going to bring up our monitoring rules screen. And again, the chevrons are across the top to indicate where we are in the process for this specific column. Beneath that, we have our context information, same information we had before. Beneath that, these tiles represent all the different categories that we've assigned specifically to each value. For instance, the first one is actually not a category assignment. It shows you everything. So we can see all the values here and the assessment that was done for it. But really, the way you're going to use this is you're going to come in and you're going to use the individual tiles to isolate specific types of problems in the data. For instance, we can isolate case. I'm going to start with the questionable content, so we'll start there. The reason I'm starting with this specific one is because I'm going to select this value, and now understand that we're going to go ahead and default to a new value going forward, which will be unknown. So anything that we can't determine whether it's male or female, we're going to default it to unknown, all in caps. So we're going to go ahead, we can remediate this, and we can transform this, and I'm going to create a new rule specifically to address when we have spaces or nulls. So I'm going to select a category. Now understand, these categories are different. The categories we used before, those were for the assessment. These are, our monitoring rule categories. And again, we have 5 different categories: accuracy, completeness, conformance, integrity, and validity. We also add a 6th category, which is no rule needed. So if you're retiring this system, you don't need a monitoring rule because it's going away. So again, that's the idea if I were doing, if I was retiring an old application, or, we bought this data and I'll never get another, I won't be, monitoring the data. It's a one-time deal that I don't need rules for it. So you could use the no rule needed. In this example, though, that we're actually dealing with completeness. The reason it's completeness is because we don't have any data here. It's either spaces or nulls, and we've already identified that as not being valid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a rule name, and I'm going to call this gender, spaces, and nulls. And I'm going to go ahead and identify a specification that can then be used by a developer to build the monitoring rule itself. So here we're going to say flag all gender values that contain spaces or nulls for completeness. So we're saying that we're missing data. And so we want them to write a rule that's going to categorize to our gender, spaces, and nulls bucket, if you will. And it's a completeness issue. So it's a completeness issue that would then be categorized as, a gender data that is either spaces or nulls. So again, that's the idea, is that we're creating the requirement for a rule that a developer can then build. So we'll add that, and now it's available. It's assigned to this specific one. So I'm going to go ahead and do a save, and that's going to save the information. So that's one thing. Now, I've already done an assessment against gender. So the other nice feature that we have built in is going to help speed up the process. If you already analyzed gender data in the past, you can select all these values that are case issues. And again, I can remediate and transform those. But I have an existing rule that I can then use specifically for case, for gender. So I'm going to say use existing rule. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to identify that. So if I drag this down, I can see that indeed I have a gender case rule already. It's a category of conformance. And what we're seeing here is that it's going to flag values that are not uppercase only. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and that has now been assigned to each one of these values. You can see that at the bottom here if I scroll down, that each value now has a rule called gender case. It has a category of conformance, and it's indicating that you're going to, the developer should flag all gender values that are not uppercase only for conformance. So again, that's the issue that it's going to track or monitor. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and now we have that taken care of. Next, we want to do our inconsistent ones. So these are our abbreviations, and I can remediate and transform those to valid values. I can also use an existing rule from a previous assessment and be able to come in and identify where we have gender abbreviations, and I'll select that one and add that rule. So again, we're reusing existing rules that have already been created in the past. Here we're saying it's a gender abbreviation, it's a conformance issue, and the message to the developer is flag this abbreviated gender value for conformance. Now this one's a little more specific than the way we mentioned the last rule, which is more generic, saying any gender value that is either spaces or nulls. Here we're saying this specific value. So these are the only abbreviations we're allowing. So again, I can select all of those and go ahead and say save. In addition, I want to go ahead and add another one for this one because it's beyond just an abbreviation. We also have an invalid character, which is the equal sign. So I'm going to add an existing rule that's already out there, and that would be our gender special character. So I'm going to come down and find that one, and here it is. So I'll select it and add it. And the reason I'm doing this is so that you can see that we have a many-to-many situation. You can create as many monitoring rules for a specific value as you would like, but you got to have at least one, even if it's the no rule needed. So I'm going to go ahead and save that as well. And now we've completed our inconsistent. Next, we'll look at our invalid content. Now, we have multiple types of invalid data here, so we want to create some specific things. For instance, I have special characters here, and I want to, again, address special characters specifically. So I have a rule that's already out there, so I'm going to go ahead and say use existing rule. And it's the one we just used just a moment ago, which is gender special characters. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one and add it, and I'm going to save that as well. And now we're ready to move on. The next ones are our numeric values here. These are invalid genders. So we're going to go ahead and select those. And I want to make sure I get all the numbers and only the numbers. And once we have that, again, I have a rule, but I can remediate and transform this to the word unknown. So I'm going to say use existing rule. And I'm going to come down here, and I should have something called gender numerics or numbers. Yep, gender numeric value. I'm going to select that and add it. And again, it's going to assign a rule, that specific rule, to each one of those values. I'm going to save that, and so that's now become part of my solution set. I'm going to drop down. And then all that's left are my invalid values. So I'm going to go ahead and select each one of these, and I'm going to say that I can remediate and transform those to the word unknown. And I'm going to go ahead and add gender invalid values here. So we have one of those. Grab that and add that. So we've actually now assigned all of those specifically to the invalid content categories we had. So all those values. Next, we're going to go ahead and take care of the spelling issue. Again, we have something already, so I know how to remediate and transform this. Obviously, these are just misspelled males. So I'm going to go ahead and flag these as well. These are the only ones that I'm allowing, this particular type of misspelling. So I'll go gender, and I should have one out here called spelling, male spelling. Here it is. So I'll select that one and add it. And now we've associated that to those specific values. I'll save it. And then we have our test data. There are two of those, so I'm going to select both of those. I can remediate and transform these to unknown. And I also should have a gender test out here. Yep, I do. So I'll select that rule and add it. And now, again, I've sped up the entire process because I'm reusing existing rules. Finally, we have our valid values. Now, again, we want to track both our good data and our bad data. We don't need to remediate and transform them, but we do need to track them. So I'm going to go ahead and use an existing rule, and I should have one out here called gender valid values, which I do. I'll select it and add that. So now we've added all the rules that are needed specifically for this particular implementation. So we'll go ahead and save everything. And you'll notice up here our create rule requirements is orange. When I say monitoring rules complete, this is going to turn green. So I'll go ahead and mark that, and if I go back in and let you look at it, indeed, it's now the create rule requirements is green. So we've completed that step in our assessment process. And once that's done, now we're ready to share this information with the data community and allow them to collaborate on both the assessment results as well as the monitoring rule requirements that we're suggesting. So again, we have an icon for that, the team review. It's under that specific column. We'll click on that icon, and it's going to bring us in. This screen looks exactly like the previous screen, except it's called the team review screen. Now, this screen is going to allow us to validate the assessment as well as the rules that have been, the monitoring rule requirements that have been identified. Now, understand that as the data community, these people should have the authority to come in and make changes because they're the ones who actually have intimate knowledge about the data, whereas the people who perform the assessment probably did not have that intimate knowledge. So if they had some insight that the person doing the assessment didn't have, they may want to make some changes. For instance, they can come in and change the category itself. If they said, no, you know what, nulls and spaces, those are valid, they could come in and remark this as a valid value. Or if they didn't agree with the note, they could add additions to the note or put on more information in here or replace it completely. But again, they have edit capability here. The same thing with all of our rules. They have the ability to come in and edit these rules because, again, they have intimate knowledge about the data. Maybe they know something that the person who did the assessment didn't know, and they want to go ahead and show that, get this correct. They can make adjustments to it. Same thing for all the different pieces here. You can come in and edit it. So beyond that, that's really the idea, is that they have the ability to come in and make changes. Now, if they do make changes, and that's fine, they still need to go ahead and approve the process. So we'll go ahead and we'll select everything here, and we're going to select everything on the bottom. Now, one thing we can do is we can do mass approvals. So, for instance, down here at the bottom, if I want to just approve all the rules that have been put out here, I can just say approve all. And it's going to ask me, do I want to approve them for all values or anything that's unapproved values, or do I want to do it by category? So I can select categories and do the drop down and pick specific ones. In our example here, though, we created these rules. We know they're valid. We want to approve them all, so we'll just say approve. And it went ahead and did that. So if I select one of these, you'll see that it all lights up, that everybody approved, all the different rules approved it. Same thing here. I'm going to approve my assessment results. So I'm going to come through and I'm going to select all the different roles. and I'm going to come in and I'm going to say approve all, and I'm going to say all values approve, and that's done as well. If I click on one of these, we can see that everything's been approved. So again, this is our collaboration component, and again, I did it all mass, but you could come in, and you should come in, I should say, come in and analyze these by tile, so by case, and look at the different information and determine, does this make sense or not? Again, this is your data community collaborating on the assessment, giving their feedback and giving their information or their knowledge from the data community back into the process. So once that's done and everybody's analyzed it and have reviewed it and agreed to it, we can come up and we can mark review complete. Now, if it wasn't done, it would actually indicate that and tell us who hasn't done their approvals yet. But in this example, it was complete. And so the team review is now done. Next, we have our column summary. So this is where you can come in and review the assessment results. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the assessment complete is green. However, we have another step in our process, which is the remediate and transform chevron. And what this is really a post-assessment effort, if you will, because the people that are doing the assessment are not necessarily going to be the people who are going to identify your remediation and transformation values. Again, that's probably going to be somebody who is from the application area, or it could possibly be the steward or custodian. But typically, it's not going to be the person doing the assessment. It may not be anybody involved in the assessment itself. So again, that's why we allow for that to come afterwards. Beneath our chevrons that are tracking our workflow, we have, again, our context information telling us the project, the database table, and attribute names. In addition, I can see who ran the project, who's the business owner or the IT sponsor. We see both of those as well. In the middle here, we can see who did the assessment, who reviewed that assessment, and then our data community, who participated, both our subject matter expert, our business owner, the custodian, the steward, and the governance person. All these people were the ones that were assigned and reviewed and did the approvals. So again, it gives traceability. And a lot of times what happens is people forget which things they've worked on, and somewhere down the lines they say, oh no, I didn't approve that, but here we can prove that indeed they did look at it and approve it at some point in the process. To the right of that information is our actual scores. So here are our assessment scores. We do something that's just very straightforward and clean. We tell you how much data is valid and how much data is invalid. So 22% of our data is good, it's in green. 77% of our data is not good, it's in red. So again, in a quick glance, I can see how much data is valid, how much is invalid. On top of that, I have a score, a data quality category score. The idea of this category score is that at a glance, I can tell you how many different types of data quality problems I have for gender. In this example, it's -6, and if you add up all the tiles, the case, the invalid content, our questionable content, spelling, and test data, there are 6 different types of problems that we've identified. So again, that's what our category score does. We can also drill into it and see, how many distinct values fit into each one of those categories, how many rows of data that represents, and the assessment percentage, or what percentage of the data fell under each one of the categories. Again, this could be exported and shared with anybody you want to within the organization. I'll go ahead and close that. On top of that, we have our regular assessment score. And again, we want to do something real straightforward, so we use the old high school grading scale. At least this is what it was when I was in high school. 90 to 100 would be an A, 80 to 89 would be a B, 70 to 79 is a C, a D would be 60 to 69%, and an F would be 50 to 59%. We figured that F minus represents anything less than 50%. So again, that's the idea of the grading scale, so that at a glance, you can see, I think everybody understands when you have an F minus that your data is not in good shape. So again, that's our idea behind the scores. One of the really nice features, though, is we have this ability to drill into this, and it's going to identify a nice report that's really more appropriate to share with, say, the director of data governance or your chief data officer, upper management, if you will. And again, this particular report is intended to share information with them. And I'll be honest with you, this is something that's really become big for our clients, because one of the things that nobody else has is really a standardized data quality score. And so we've done that here. We've created a standardized score. It's consistent. And again, it communicates everything we want to upper management. So in a glance, they can see that indeed we have a large percentage of our data is not good. And then we can also see how much of the data is good visually. We can see it right here in this table. In addition, we have a breakdown of the different types of problems and how many occurrences there are. So we can see here that the majority of our problem are case issues, but we also have some invalid content and inconsistent content, some spelling problems going on, questionable content, as well as test data. So you can see all the breakdown. Now, what's really powerful about this is today, a lot of our clients are dumping millions of dollars into data quality and doing this type of work. However, they don't know what they're getting out of it. There's no tangible return on investment from their perspective. Here, this starts to differentiate the DQAM and allow you to do that, because you can run the assessment, as we've done here, identify the data that needs to be remediated, identify the rules for doing that remediation and transformation, execute the remediation rules themselves, then perform another assessment and generate this report and be able to compare and contrast between the assessment, the first time they did the assessment, and after we cleaned up the data, the post-remediation assessment. And being able to compare those, now management can say, okay, here's what it looked like before, here I spent X amount of money, and here's what it looks like afterwards. So they can actually get a return on investment that's tangible that they can then present to management, their management, or the people they report to, and indicate that indeed the money's being spent well and that data is getting cleaned up and that nothing's being wasted. So again, this is really kind of a game changer for a lot of our clients and being able to get funded to do data quality work and to be able to show their management the value of what they're getting out of doing this work. So again, very useful, very powerful. Beneath that, we have our tiles. So again, here, let's say that I'm the director of data governance. I'm coming in to review an assessment result specifically for gender. I've already looked at my, my scores and everything. But now I want to say, you know what? I can't go back to my upper management and tell them the majority of my problems are cases. So I'll click on case. And here, this is one thing that really did happen. We really had a director of data governance say, I can't go to upper management and tell them the majority of my problems are case issues. Or, I'm going to get, smacked in the head. But here instead, what we're saying is, yeah, you can. We go in, we show them, we say, these are real data quality problems where we have, everything's uppercase here except for the E in this female. Or this one where the FEM is lowercase and ALE is uppercase. Again, these are the types of problems that we're identifying, and these are true data quality problems. It's not just a matter of these, like this example here, where it's male, it's mixed case, and it should be uppercase. Sometimes it's beyond that, and that's what we needed to communicate. And of course, once we showed this to that client, they're like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. So again, that's part of it. The other way that this becomes very useful is traceability. So again, if somebody said, well, I don't believe my person approved that, they can select this and see who did approve these. And again, they can see that, yeah, my person did approve it. So again, traceability, they can look here and see what role was played from each of the data community people and, who did those roles, and then be able to track back and see that they did the approvals. Beneath our tiles, we now have some summary tables. So here on the first one, the monitoring requirements, what we're showing is that we have 36 different values. We have 9 different rules that are covering those 36 values, and we have no values without rules, so that's 0. In the remediation, we're seeing that indeed we have 36 values. 34 of those can be remediated, but 2 can't. Those, of course, would be our valid values. Same thing with our transformation rules. We have 36 values, 34 transformation rules. 2 of them don't need to be transformed because there are valid values. So again, that's the intent, and that's of the how these tables are to be used. Beneath that, we actually have our rule summary. So again, this is where we have our post-assessment work to do. And again, this is where we're going to identify our remediation and transformation rules. If I click on this first tile, it brings up all the different problems that we had in the data. So it brings up all our values. It's not specific to what rule category they were given. I can also come in and look at individual ones. So if I wanted to, I can come in and see where things had validity issues and deal with them directly. But I do want to start by just demonstrating some of the, how we can speed up this entire process. One of the things we can do is we have this edit capability. So I'm going to select edit. And what we can do here, for instance, I know that we're going to convert a lot of these things to unknown. A lot of our values were not right, or they were just missing data. And so we're going to default those to unknown. We can't tell if they're male or female, but we know they're not correct. So I'm going to communicate again to the developer and say, transform, or I can say, remediate is probably better. Remediate and transform this value to unknown. So this is going to get assigned to each of the values that I select. So here I can say update by, and I can do things en masse. I can say everything on the current page or all the values if I want. I can also say update by assessment category. That's what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to select that because I know that everything that was questionable, that was identified as test data, invalid data, all of those are not correct and that are going to be converted over to unknown. So I can do that. I can also select by rule category if I want, but I've already decided that I'm going to use the assessment category. When I save this, it's going to apply that to all of the ones that were identified as having those specific types of assessment categories assigned. So again, that's what we're seeing here. In addition to being able to use that capability, it can also come in and manually type things in. So I could do that here for female. You know what though? A better example would be is if I just select these items. So anything like this, where it's a female, I'm going to go ahead and select all our females here. And not only on this page, but on the next page as well. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to select this one, and there are 2 down here that I need, and that should be it for this page. I'll go to the next page, and I'm going to select some more values. So anything that has that should be female, like this one here should be female. Let's see what else we have. That looks like it. Okay, so I've selected all the females. I can say edit, and now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and say, remediate this to female. Oops, so if I got to spell it correctly, F-E-M-A-L-E. Same thing here, F-E-M-A-L-E. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a note in saying, again, remediate and transform this value to F-E-M-A-L-E. There we go. Okay, so again, I'm communicating to the developer to remediate and transform this specific value to female. So, and then again, I've already selected values, so I can just save that, and now it's applied to everything that I had selected. So here on the first page, we can see that. Next, we have our males, so let's do that one real quick. We have a male here. We have another male here that should be uppercase male. We have another one here. and that should be it for this one. One more. There we go. And then we'll go to the next page, and we'll identify the ones here that need to be transformed and remediated, those two values. That looks like everything. Okay, so we'll edit those. And again, I'm going to say these should be uppercase male, and then I'm going to say remediate, oops, spell it right, remediate and transform to this value to male. There we go. So again, I'm communicating to the developer that they're going to create a remediation rule to fix this specific data. Now we should have something assigned to everything. It looks like that's correct. Once we do that, again, the software enforces our rule. So here, when I say complete rules, we should now see this chevron turn green. So I'll say complete rules, and indeed it did turn green. And that ends the entire assessment process from beginning to end. So with some of the other things that I kind of brushed over and I didn't really spend time on, if we come back in and I want to communicate that information to my developer, I can export this right to Excel. So if I finish this and I say, okay, I'm confident that it's ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and ship this over and have the developer do it. Here, he's got enough information. He knows that this is for the gender, and what table it belongs to. We can see, the value right here that needs to be remediated, what it should be remediated and transformed to. So again, this is something that, it's basically identifying the requirements for remediation and transformation. I can send that right to a developer, and they can, get started on creating those rules for me. So again, that's the intention here. I can also, now that I've closed that, I can also come back out, and let's say I want to do the same thing, but I want to do it for my assessment. Let's do that. Let's back all the way out because I didn't show you that. So if we come back into our assessment itself, we can come up to the value level. Here I can come in, and if I wanted to share this assessment with somebody, I can export it again to Excel. I'm going to open that up so you can see it. The first worksheet is going to have our context, so this is going to be able to inform the person of, who was the project manager, what was the table that we're looking at, what column, how many total rows, and how many values were analyzed. So then I can also go to the value assessment, and I can actually see that assessment and share this information. So I can put this up in SharePoint. I can email it to somebody. But again, I'm going to make this information available to them, and mostly because they don't have the software. That's really the intent. So again, that's the idea, is that you have many places within the product that you can do that. So for instance, if I come back out and I go back to the summary screen, we also have a summary report you can export out into Excel. This one is going to provide a lot of the same information that we want to share with everybody that doesn't have access to the software. So here we can see the project information. We can see the assessment score specific to gender. We come over, we can also see the results of the rules that we've identified, how many different things have to be created, and actually who worked on the project, who did all of this. So you might want to generate this and put it with the assessment results themselves and send that off to somebody. So again, that's the idea, is that you have the ability to export and take data out of the DQAM and share it with other folks. Now, in addition, I want to show you some things in the first name. So we'll go ahead and drill into that. And again, the reason I wanted to do this is because some of our capabilities just aren't as powerful when you don't have enough data. So here we're going to be able to look at, there are 10,000 distinct values. I have this set up or configured so that we can look at 2,000 of them at a time, understanding that I can control how many values are displayed in the grid, and I will show you how we control that. But one of the things I want to start with is showing you our filtering capability. So here, if I want to filter, let's say on a pattern, this is a first name, I should never have a numeric value. So I could put an uppercase N in here, and then you click on our filter, and what's going to happen is anything that's got numbers in it is now going to show up. Here we have patterns that have numbers in it. I'm going to select all of these, and these are all invalid. So I'm going to go ahead and select those and mark them as being invalid content and save that. So again, our filtering can allow us to speed up the process. Another one would be punctuation. I should not have any punctuation in a first name. So I'll go ahead and do that. And here we can see everything that has punctuation. Again, these are all invalid. So I'll select all of those, and I'm going to mark those as being invalid as well. So again, what we're doing here is we're speeding up the process using our filtering. We can do the same thing for signs. We shouldn't have signs. If I do that, we have another set of data. And again, these are all signs that should not have, be in a first name. I can flag those as being invalid and save those as well. So again, that shows you the whole capability of being able to use our filtering capability. We also have the idea of a sort. So here you can sort things. In our example here, I want to use the spacing. So I'm going to float everything to the top that isn't a valid spacing. So I'm going to submit that. And again, it's going to go through all 10,000 values, and it's going to float to the top. Anything that has, like here, we have some consecutive spaces. We also have leading spaces. If we come down, we also have trailing spaces. So I'm going to grab all of those and mark them as being invalid. So I'm going to just grab them all, and we're going to mark those as being invalid. I have some of them already marked. It doesn't matter. I'll go ahead and save that. Again, speeding up the assessment process, okay? So that's the idea. So we'll go ahead and save that, and we can cancel out. One of the other things I like to be able to do is, let's say I'm doing case. Here we can see in our example for first name anyway, that we have more values and rows of uppercase than we do mixed case. So uppercase is going to be the one that I'm going to say is the valid case. So I can go into mixed case, and inside mixed case I can say, okay, well, all these have case issues, all these values. So I could select the first one and say, okay, this one definitely has a case issue, mark it as such, and I can apply that to the current page. I can say, okay, everything on this page has got a case issue, and I can mark it, and it changes all of them. But you'll notice that if I go to the next screen, I'll go ahead and save this. But if I go to the next screen, the next page worth of data, it's not marked. These aren't marked as being case issues. So again, I know they are case issues, and I want to deal with that. So I'm going to go ahead and come back over here, and I'm going to say, okay, I want to mark all of them as a case issue. I'll select that first one and say apply to all. And it's going to apply to everything with that filter. It takes it a second, so it's going to come back. There it is. Now when I go to the second and third grids full of data, I'm going to see that all of them have been marked as being case issues as well. So again, that kind of gives you an idea of some of the pieces within the DQAM that are going to help speed up the process and speed up that assessment process. Because here you can already see the total number of values is 5,008. That's actually the total number of rows. And of those 50,008 rows, 22,650 of them have already been assessed. So we've already gotten almost halfway through the data just using our high-level capabilities without having to go through each value individually. So again, we want to take advantage of all our frequencies, our filtering capabilities, to really isolate data and be able to mark them quickly and move on to the next thing. So again, that's the idea here. We're going to go ahead and cancel out of here. And then the next thing I wanted to demonstrate is there's a couple other things. So first thing is that this one already, I have an example out here that has a little bit more done already. One of the things I want to show is that we have a report. Now, you can't be in edit mode to see this report, but we have an inventory report. So if I was, the project manager and I want to see where I was on this, it's been a week or something since the last time I touched it, I can come in and I can run this report, and it's going to show me what data has already been analyzed, and I also, on top of that, show me how much of that data is good and how much of it's bad. So I can see an assessment result pretty quick by just coming in and running that report and seeing what data has been analyzed and what hasn't. In our example here, we've already analyzed the state, the country, and the gender, and that's what this particular report is showing. However, if we've done all the columns, we would see them all here and the results of those assessments. So again, this is going to be something that is going to be very useful when you're managing these types of projects. So again, that's the idea there. We also have the ability, as I mentioned earlier, to configure the DQAM, so we'll go ahead and do some of that. This is the first thing that we talked about, which is our categories. These are our assessment categories, and as you can see here, like appears valid. If you wanted to change the color, you can do that. All you have to do is click on the edit, and you can edit all of this information. You can change this to appears valid and add some additional information if you want. You can change the description. You can change the anomaly category note. So again, you have the ability to come in and really customize this. Change the color, everything. You have complete control. In addition, you can add new ones by clicking on this plus sign. So we supply 9 categories for identifying problems in the data and 2 for valid data. If you wanted to add additional ones, you can add additional categories. If you have some that are specific to, say, your industry that nobody else has, you can add those right here. So complete configuration capability, understanding that this then would show up in our charts and all of our reports as well. So again, that's what that does. We also have the default page size setting. This is an important one. I'm going to go ahead and edit this. I'll put this back to 1,000 rather than 2,000. But that's how many values are going to be displayed in a value grid page. Same thing here. We have complete control, so we can also control how many monitoring rule values are displayed, our team review values, and our team review rules grid page. So you have a lot of control over how much data is being presented to you. And many times you want to increase that number when you have deep data. So if you have a lot of distinct values, you don't want to have to flip through pages to identify issues. You want to go ahead and increase these numbers to a point where it makes sense, and you can look at a large number of data values all at the same time. So again, that's the idea there. That's our configuration. And again, I really hope you enjoyed what you saw here. This demonstration. We're really proud of the DQAM. It brings a lot of value to our clients and our customers, provides a standardized process for everybody to follow, and again, delivers a data quality assessment that you can reuse over and over again, as well as identifying the requirements for your rules. Any questions or concerns, you feel free to reach out and contact me directly. Again, my name is Antonio Amarin. You can reach me on my cell phone, 847-975-0217. Feel free to give me a call if you have any questions about the DQAM that I can answer for you. And again, I appreciate your time today and look forward to speaking to everybody again in the near future. Thank you very much.